Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Fronteras, a Changing America. I'm Anthony Moreno. On the program today, we talk with the director of the Empowerment Congress of Doña County. Please welcome Daisy Maldonado. Daisy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
Can you provide a little history of your organization?
Sure. So the Empowerment Congress started back in 2011 with community members around Doña County that really wanted to work together to change the conditions of the Colonia community members. And so they visited the community in Los Angeles County and learned a model about gathering people together, working in tandem with county and city governments, along with community members to make changes within their community. And so they brought that model back with the idea of really bringing together all of the colonias, all 37 of them.
That's a challenge.
It's a big task. And then working on policies to improve the conditions and the quality of life for every individual, right, and family, child living in the colonias. And so they had a lot of great success in terms of getting some funding for the public transit district, as well as funding for like senior activities and youth activities. But then there was a little bit of a lull around 15, 16 with funding and, staff changes. And so when I joined the team in 2018, we really shifted the focus a little bit. And so instead of trying to get all of the colonias together to agree on one or two policies, we decided to go ahead and focus in on one or two colonias specifically, and then work with community members there to really support them in determining what their needs were and then creating a plan to advocate for those needs.
Every community is so different
Indeed.
In our county, especially when you get into the rural areas. So what is it that is so unique about each of the counties you think that you've worked with? Can you give us an example?
Sure. So right now we're working, we have a dedicated team in the city of Sunland Park, which is, although it's a city, it's incorporated, it's still considered a colonia. And then we're also working in the Vado del Cerro area. And so they all have infrastructure issues by and large all over the county. But what's different between, let's say, the city of Sunland Park and Vado del Cerro is because they're incorporated, they have a little bit more in terms of funding for infrastructure, but that infrastructure is still, it's dated, it's worn, it's in need of repair. Where in the Vado del Cerro area, because it's an unincorporated community, it's much smaller. There's way less resources. They don't have a grocery store. They don't they don't have a clinic. There's no youth programming. They have one community center. They don't have a dedicated, police or fire, or they have a lot of that is volunteer or that comes from the county. So whereas the city of Sunland Park has those things, but the major issue that we're facing right now in the city of Sunland Park actually, and in the area, is the water quality from the water provider there.
Let's talk about water. It's so important to our region, and there's been a lot of reporting on it about just how dire the situation is if we don't improve our water sustainability. And you're talking about quality. So that's another concern for a lot of folks. We're talking about potential health impacts in the area. Can you kind of share a little bit more about what is your greatest concern with water in our area?
Yeah, so our greatest concern would be drinking water and whether or not it's potable. So in the city of Sunland Park, the water provider is the Camino Real Regional Utility Authority, and it's actually a water board that's a joint agreement between the city of Sunland Park and Doña County. But ever since the city was founded, the water that's being provided to the community has arsenic in it. And although it's not an exuberant amount of arsenic, it's enough to be above the EPA's regulation threshold for drinking water. And that's since the city of Sunland Park, became a city back in, 1980s. So people that have been living there have been consuming low levels of arsenic this entire time. So that's huge, right? Because arsenic can be very damaging to the body, and in particular at very low levels, because people don't see the impacts of it until later on, right? Until later on in life after consuming it for so many years. But arsenic actually is something that impacts every community in the south part of the state, because it's a naturally occurring element. And so it actually, every water provider has to do their part to make sure they clean the water of arsenic before they deliver it to their customers.
So what has the steps been with your organization and working with the community there to improve that situation?
Yeah, so what we've been trying to do is work with the water provider, along with the EPA and the environmental department, to see what exactly is happening in terms of what's the barrier to providing clean water. And at this point, it has to do with infrastructure. And that again goes back to funding. And so what's needed is that a proper water filtration system needs to be constructed within that service area. But because of other interests, the precedent, or what I should say, the priority is being given to commercial water services. So we're continuing to have those conversations, both with the EPA and the environmental department, to say this needs to change, right? This needs to stop, and we need to really put the money and our efforts into building that residential arsenic treatment plant.
So what lawmakers at the local and state level and federal level what are some things that they can do to try to make an impact with this?
Yeah, well, and it's interesting that you asked that question, because on the on the board for this water provider, there's actually City of Sunland Park Council folks, there's Doña County Commission folks, there's a few representatives from our state, and so what they can do is they can compel, right? They can compel the water provider, the people that are actually running the water service, to make the priority the residential treatment services, treatment facility.
Yeah, the certain steps in solving problems in our region, dealing with government at different levels, some things may take time, but do you see any positive change or positive communication with any of these government agencies or the local governments, the county or the state, to where you think we may have a solution to this issue?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll tell you. I'll be perfectly frank. I'm not sure. This is an issue that's been going on for many, many years. So this isn't something brand new, right? And they continue to ensure that they're working on it, that there's a plan, that we just need the money. And so I really think that it has, like I said, it comes down to really compelling the water service provider, as well as the legislators, right, the electeds, to truly make it a priority, as opposed to something that's on the periphery that we're not going to fund because other projects, for one reason or another, are more of a priority.
I see. Now, infrastructure, there's a lot that goes into that. When we talk about infrastructure, you mentioned water. We also have roads, sewage, and now broadband, so crucial to the success of many communities in our area. Can you talk a little bit about how improving those other issues within the infrastructure system can help develop and sustain colonias in our area?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. So that water and water infrastructure is just one piece of what's really needed to build a thriving community. And so things like roads and drainage, right? So not just sewage, but drainage to mitigate flooding. And I was talking earlier about clinics and hospitals and grocery stores are just a few of the other forms of infrastructure, but they're not going to move in, right? Those companies won't come in if we don't have proper roads, if there's not proper lighting, if there's not proper drainage for flooding. So that's why the big piece of, or that's really why it's so crucial to start there, because you really can't build the community if the foundation hasn't been created.
Now building that foundation within the community when it comes to organizing.
Yeah.
You do a lot of that within the different communities in our area. What have you found to be the most successful approach when trying to do that?
Yeah, so organizing the communities is very difficult, actually. And I'll start with challenges first before I get into successes, because it's a big challenge, because a lot of these community members have heard the stories again and again that things are being taken care of. You know, don't worry, you're going to get that road will be repaired, or there's lots of times there's excuses and there's different loopholes that we can't jump through, or there's certain barriers, there's certain red tape that just isn't going to get removed in order for us to make sure you have sidewalks and streetlights. So they're pretty hesitant actually initially to get involved. They say, well, we've done this before, it doesn't work, right? And so what we have found in terms of success is coming together and say, well, let's start here with us right now. Let's build out our community amongst ourselves, right? And so what we've brought is celebrations to the community, which they often, don't get the benefit of, right? They have to travel somewhere. So we have fun little celebrations, for the people that live in the colonias. And then we come together on a regular basis and say, we understand it's frustrating because we're in it with you, right? We're in the deep end, trying to also support and trying to make this happen. And so let's get together and let's create a plan, right? And so what's been really successful is to say that we're doing this together as opposed to be very prescriptive and saying this is what you should do and this is how to do it. Instead, we're going and saying we're going to work together, we're going to have some fun, we're going to celebrate each other, and then we're going to, and then we're going to, walk hand in hand, arm in arm, and fight this together.
Now, your organization has also worked with youth in the area on some different projects. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. And so actually, it's funny. I was just in another meeting, and we were talking all about youth, and then they started talking about community. It's like, oh, youth is so much more. It's uplifting. But what we want to do with young people, so before they get to the point where, where they're disheartened, where they're beaten down, what we want to do is really encourage them to come together and make a contribution to their community, right? And so what we do is we host some workshops around community, around social justice, and what does it mean to live in the world we live in today? And then how can we beautify your community through some sort of art form? And so far, we've only painted some murals around the county, and I'm waiting for the day that we work with an artist and do a multimedia piece. But yeah, so we get together, and it's different every time, right? Because young people all over the county we all have different ideas. And so we have painted and constructed 3 large-scale murals around the county, one in Berino, one in Anthony, and one in Chaparral. And again, they're all different. They're different young people, they have different ideas, and it's really there just to show that they can do something, right? Maybe they can't vote, maybe they can't go to, they can't go to a meeting or, stand up and make a change at the county or the city level, but they can do something with their hands and they can contribute to their community.
You're also working together on a project and, improving the community with that. That has to be another great experience, I'd imagine, for youth in the area to come together, to learn the value of working together as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a big piece of also of the work that we do and just the model that we use. It's very community based. We're collectivistic, right? Not individualistic. So and that's what we definitely also believe in terms of organizing as well as building community, right? There's not a community of one. There's a community of us. And so when we come together, we can create a bigger impact. And so let's cooperate and let's see what we can do.
So what are the barriers of cooperation when it comes to opportunities like that?
Yeah, well, when we're talking about differences of opinion, that's probably the biggest issue is everybody has their own ideas, right? And whose idea is the idea that gets chosen, right? And so what we really try to do is build some consensus around the decision making. And try and do it in a fair way. We do this, what we call dotmocracy, where you can vote on things with little dots, as opposed, so you can sort of not sway, but like emphasize what you feel that's more important. But there's also a process like, okay, we need to hear from everybody in the room, right? Everybody needs to speak and not just hear from one voice. So that's probably the biggest barrier is trying to come to an agreement. But then once we do, right, then it's like, okay, now we're working towards something.
Your group has also worked with the Success Partnership in our area, collaboration with a lot of organizations, working with families in our area. Can you share a little bit about some of the things you've been able to do?
Yeah. So with the Success Partnership, we've actually been part of that since the beginning, since the Success Partnership first started. And so we've partnered and joined the coalition in terms of the different meetings. We've hosted some workshops with them. We've also been participatory in the strategic planning, as well as hosting like family dialogues around the county. And I don't know what the latest thing is. Probably just sitting on the different coalitions and really trying to be strategic about how we're going to work together.
Talking with all those families in our county, throughout the region, what are some things that you've taken away from that? What do you think about when you hear those responses and reactions from families in our region? I'm sure they share a lot with you all about perhaps challenges they're facing. Maybe they're celebrating something, but how does that provide insight into the communities in our region?
Yeah, well, it provides, so not only myself, but the other thing is, we have, Empowerment Congress has a staff of 14, so that's, we're growing, which is awesome. But really what we're hearing on the ground, and I guess I like to tell my staff, like when we're in spaces of like coalition and, people look to us because of our positions, we're bringing the voice of the community into the room. And so I really feel like we're the bridge, right? Even though I would prefer our community member to be at a coalition meeting table, but that's not how our system is working right now, right? So what we're gonna do then is at a minimum, be the voice. And so what we're hearing on the ground from community members in the colonias is that, not that life is difficult, right? Life is difficult, but it's more difficult because of so many resources that they lack, right, within their community. We're, again, talking about just simple things like a grocery store, like a clinic, like a hospital. But then the other thing too is really not having an understanding of how different systems work, and that they can actually also be an advocate for themselves, right? And so sitting back saying, well, I don't understand this, or this isn't fair, and then just talking with them saying, well, this is something we can do, right? This is a barrier that's you might see as a barrier, but actually something we can work through together. And there's sort of like some aha moments, like, oh, I had no idea that I could, that I had a right to ask for this thing, or that, that the community or like the county or the city should be providing this to my family.
Now you brought up something, just knowledge of resources available, or, things within folks' rights of the residents that live in our county to ask for these resources. How big of an issue is that in our area?
I would say it's an issue in terms of the gap, right? Just like everything else. So there's a gap in terms of those who know and those who don't know. So the group that doesn't know, that's a big barrier. That's a big barrier for their daily life, right? Because again, they just aren't aware. I know, so the city of Sunland Park, they've actually instituted sort of like a LIHEAP assistance for water, for the water service. And so the community coordinator that works there says, "Oh, I let them know." And I was like, "Okay." And then we wait, right? And so then nobody applies and nobody goes down to the offices. It's like, and now we have to go to the next step. We're going to walk with people to say, this is how you do it. This is what you need. And then once that happens, then they have a better understanding, right, of the system. But if we're just handing out information, by and large, even that, like, people might know that something exists, but they might not know exactly what that is.
Now, your organization was also involved in getting some important information out during COVID-19. Can you share with us a little bit about the efforts? We just have about a minute and a half left, but I'd like to hear about that.
Okay. So quickly, yes. So COVID-19 was a huge barrier in terms of being able to reach the community. And so what Empowerment Congress did is actually hired some community health workers to go out into the colonias and let people know about the vaccine specifically. And then from there actually started bringing vaccine clinics to the community so that people can not only be informed, but then at the same time receive the vaccine at that same day, at that interaction.
Now, moving forward, what are some of your biggest goals that you have for the organizations, for your organization right now in the near term?
Yeah, so I would really, what we're hoping to do is move forward with the Sunland Park, issue around the water and get the arsenic treatment plant funded. Within Valle del Cerro, we would definitely want to get some funding for infrastructure around roads and streetlights and sidewalks. And then just in terms of health in general, since we're moving sort of out of COVID, we really want to bring a level of health literacy and health education to all of the colonias that we're working in. And so then we can embed community health workers in everywhere we work so that people know that we are a trusted organization that they can come find information about, not only around health, but water and government and any other issue that they might have.
Daisy Maldonado is director of the Empowerment Congress of Doña County. Daisy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
They would be slightly elevated at this time until the end of next week. All mechanical facilities break down and have to be upgraded. Arsenic plants are no different. They have chemical pumps in place and other facilities, equipment associated with them, and they have to be upgraded and repaired.
Moving on, we now learn how community members in Las Cruces helped a local artist relocate her rock art after it was in jeopardy due to planned construction. KRWG's Johnny Coker has the story.
Kathy Morrow is a Las Cruces resident and an artist who created a public rock sculpture across the Tortugas Dam. Her art had to be moved due to the upcoming construction plans, but with the help of volunteers, her artwork is being reconfigured in front of the NMSU Golf Course Clubhouse. Morrow said that she didn't realize at first how vast her original art project would be.
It wasn't my intention. My intention was to go for a walk and, oh, look at the funny rocks over there. Let me put some down, see how far they go to the next one. And then it just grew and grew and grew.
Morrow had been piecing together her work on the dam for over 5 years. And as time went on, her pieces got larger.
I did a turtle and I did a small butterfly and I started working. Pretty soon I was making more and more. At this point, the community was so interested in what I was doing that as I walked along the dam, there would be piles of yellow or white or green rock.
As the scale of her artwork grew, so did the interest of the public. Now, Morrow had a following within the community supporting her work.
But as I started doing the artwork, people got sucked in, and pretty soon we were talking and I was getting to know them and they were getting to know me, and then they were talking to each other, and then it became a community. Did you see the art on the dam? Oh, did you know she does this or this? And it just changed the whole character of people walking and passing each other to becoming involved.
Mauro explained that due to plans for the Tortugas Dam to be rebuilt, her artwork would either have to be moved or destroyed.
So EBID, Elephant Butte Irrigation District, allowed me to move all the art to this location here on the hill. NMSU allowed me to have this location on the hill.
Mauro said that her artwork on the dam became a point of interest for tourists and locals alike, and she hopes that the new location is able to conjure up a similar sentiment within the community.
I noticed that when I was doing it on the dam that we were getting a lot of visitors in from out of state, and they would be visiting family in Las Cruces, and it became something you must go see. You must walk and go see this. So I think this will be an attraction that'll be a positive for NMSU and for Las Cruces.
Mauro says that she is thankful for NMSU and EBID for allowing her to reconfigure her project on NMSU property. She hopes to have the project completed within the next 12 months. For KRWG Public Media, I'm Johnny Coker.
Thanks for joining us on the program this week. I'm Anthony Moreno. We'll see you next time on Fronteras, A Changing America.